Princess Zara stood in the grand hall of the royal palace, watching hundreds of guests fill the crystal seats. Today was her wedding day, but she felt no joy. The ceremony was not about love or happiness. It was about survival. The Keltharian Empire stretched across 50 star systems. For 3,000 years, her people had conquered world after world with their brilliant military minds. Keltharian generals could predict enemy moves 10 battles ahead. Their strategies were studied by every civilization in the galaxy. But now they were dying. A strange sickness had struck her people 5 years ago. Keltharian women could no longer have children. The best doctors could not find a cure. The greatest scientists had failed. In 50 years, there would be no more Keltharians left in the universe. Then the humans had arrived. The Terran Federation was young compared to other galactic powers. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. Most older civilizations saw them as children playing with dangerous toys. But these children claimed they could cure the Keltharian plague. The price was an alliance. Military cooperation. Technology sharing. And a symbolic marriage between a Keltharian princess and a human diplomat. That diplomat was Tom Chen. Zara looked across the altar at her soon-to-be husband. He was average height for a human, with dark hair and brown eyes. He wore the formal blue uniform of the Terran Federation. Nothing about him seemed special. He looked like any other human she had met during the peace negotiations. During those long talks, Tom had been quiet and polite. He let the senior human diplomats do most of the talking. When he did speak, it was usually to ask simple questions about Keltharian culture or history. Zara had assumed he was just a junior officer chosen for this political theater. Princess Zara of the Keltharian Empire, the priest began in the ancient tongue. Do you take this human as your bonded partner in the sight of the eternal stars? I do, Zara replied. Her voice echoed through the silent hall. The priest turned to Tom. Tom Chen of the Terran Federation. Do you take this Keltharian as your bonded partner in the sight of the eternal stars? I do, Tom said. His accent was decent, though he pronounced some words strangely. They exchanged the traditional golden bands. Tom's hands were steady as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Zara noticed his palms were rough with old calluses. Strange for a diplomat who should spend his time behind desks. By the power of both our peoples, I declare you joined in sacred bond, the priest announced. The crowd erupted in polite applause. Zara and Tom turned to face their audience. Keltharian nobles in their silver robes sat on one side. Human officials in dark suits occupied the other. Both groups were smiling, but Zara could see the worry in their eyes. This marriage represented hope for two different reasons. For the Keltharians, it meant a possible cure for their extinction. For the humans, it meant protection from the ancient enemies that would soon notice their growing power. After the ceremony, Zara and Tom walked together to the reception hall. Hundreds of guests mingled, sharing food and drink from both cultures. Keltharian musicians played their crystal harps while human jazz echoed from another corner. Your Highness, Tom said quietly as they moved through the crowd. I want you to know I understand what this marriage really means. You do not have to pretend this is anything more than politics. Zara studied his face. Most humans she had met were easy to read. Their emotions showed clearly. But Tom's expression was calm and unreadable. I appreciate your honesty, she replied. Though I hope we can at least be friends. I would like that very much. They spent the next hour greeting guests and accepting congratulations. Tom was polite to everyone, but Zara noticed he never fully relaxed. His eyes constantly moved around the room. He positioned himself so he could always see the main exits. When Keltharian generals approached to chat, Tom asked thoughtful questions about their past campaigns. You seem very interested in military history, General Korvac noted. I find strategy fascinating, Tom replied. The Battle of Zirian Prime was brilliant. How did you coordinate that pincer movement across 3 different moons? Korvok's eyes lit up. Few humans cared about Keltharian tactics. They spent 20 minutes discussing troop movements and supply lines. Zara was surprised by how well Tom understood complex military concepts. As the reception continued, she began to notice other things about her new husband. He ate very little and drank nothing alcoholic. He memorized the names of every person he met. When a server dropped a tray of glasses, Tom moved to help before the crash even finished echoing. We should retire to our quarters, Zara suggested as the evening grew late. Tomorrow we travel to Nexus Station for our diplomatic tour. Tom nodded. Of course. I will have my staff pack the remaining gifts. Their quarters were in the royal wing of the palace. Zara had ordered a second bedroom prepared for Tom, assuming he would want privacy. But as they walked through the sitting room, explosions suddenly shook the building. Red emergency lights flashed. Alarm sirens wailed through the corridors. Palace security to the royal wing, a voice announced over the communication system. We have hostile infiltrators. All residents remain in secure locations. Zara moved toward the panic room, but Tom caught her arm. Wait, he said quietly. Listen. She paused. Through the walls, she could hear running footsteps and shouted orders. But Tom was focused on something else. His head was tilted slightly, like he was tracking specific sounds. For attackers, he said. Coming up the main stairwell. 2 more on the service elevator. They have energy weapons and personal shields. How can you possibly know that? Zara asked. Instead of answering, Tom moved to the decorative weapon display on the wall. He pulled down an ancient Keltharian war blade and tested its weight. Your security team will engage them in about 30 seconds, he continued. The attackers will retreat down the east corridor and try to access this room through the window. As if summoned by his words, the sound of weapons fire erupted from somewhere below them. Zara heard her guards shouting tactical commands. Tom walked to the large window and examined the lock. The glass is reinforced but not military grade. They will break through in approximately 2 minutes. How do you know all this? Zara demanded. Tom looked at her with those calm brown eyes. For a moment, she saw something else there. Something sharp and dangerous. Because this is what I do, he said simply. Before she could ask what he meant, the window exploded inward. 2 figures in black armor swung through on cables. Their faces were hidden behind combat masks, but Zara recognized the red symbols on their chests. Zarathi assassins. The first attacker raised his energy rifle toward Zara. But Tom was already moving. He threw the Keltharian blade with perfect accuracy. It struck the assassin's weapon and sent it spinning away. Before the enemy could react, Tom grabbed a heavy crystal sculpture and hurled it at the second attacker. The impact cracked the man's helmet and sent him stumbling backward. The first assassin drew a smaller weapon and fired. The energy beam should have killed Tom instantly. But he was no longer where the shot was aimed. He had rolled behind a couch and come up on the attacker's blind side. What happened next made Zara's breath catch in her throat. Tom moved like nothing she had ever seen. Not faster than possible, but with absolute efficiency. Every motion served a purpose. He grabbed the assassin's weapon arm and applied pressure to a specific point. The man's fingers opened involuntarily, dropping the gun. Tom caught the falling weapon and used it as a club to strike the assassin's throat. The man collapsed, gasping for air. The second attacker had recovered and was reaching for backup equipment. Tom threw the captured weapon at his head, then followed with his entire body. They crashed together into the wall. When they separated, only Tom was still standing. The whole fight had taken less than 15 seconds. Zara stared at her new husband. The quiet diplomat was gone. In his place stood someone who moved like a predator. His breathing was steady. His hands showed no tremor from adrenaline. He quickly searched the unconscious attackers and removed several more weapons she had not even seen. "Are you injured?" Tom asked, his voice still perfectly calm. "No, I am fine," Zara managed to say. "But you are not a diplomat." Tom looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. "I am whatever humanity needs me to be." Palace security arrived moments later. They found Tom sitting calmly in a chair while Zara tended to a small cut on her arm from flying glass. The two assassins were tied up with curtain cords and stripped of all their equipment. Captain Renz, head of palace security, examined the scene with obvious confusion. "Your Highness, what happened here?" "Zarathi infiltrators," Zara replied. Tom stopped them. The captain looked at the unconscious attackers, then at Tom, then back at the attackers. "The human did this?" "Yes," Zara said firmly. "He saved my life." Later that night, after giving statements to security and meeting with the Planetary Defense Council, Zara and Tom finally returned to their quarters. New windows had been installed and all traces of the attack cleaned away. They sat together on the repaired couch, sharing a pot of Caltharian tea. "You are not just a diplomat," Zara said. "You are military." Tom nodded. "Special operations. I have been for 15 years. And the Terran Federation sent a Special Forces soldier to marry me as part of a peace treaty?" "They sent someone who could protect the Alliance," Tom replied. "This marriage is important to both our peoples. There are many groups who want it to fail." Zara thought about the way he had moved during the attack. The casual precision. The complete lack of fear. "What other secrets are you hiding?" she asked. Tom met her eyes. "Many. But I promise you this. I will never lie to you directly. And I will never let anyone harm you while I draw breath." As she looked at her mysterious new husband, Zara realized the Terran Federation was more complex than anyone had imagined. If they sent someone like Tom as their diplomat, what were their actual soldiers like? Outside the window, the first transport ships were already arriving to begin their diplomatic tour of the neutral stations. Soon they would meet representatives from dozens of civilizations, all eager to understand this new human-Caltharian alliance. But Zara found herself more interested in understanding the man sitting beside her. The man who could fight like a warrior but speak like a scholar. The man who had married her for politics but risked his life to protect her. The man who might be far more dangerous than any enemy their alliance would face. 3 months had passed since the wedding. Princess Zara and Tom had traveled to 12 different stations and met with leaders from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand the new alliance between the ancient Caltharian Empire and the young Terran Federation. Zara had learned much about her husband during their diplomatic tour. Tom spoke 7 languages fluently. He could discuss art with Centauri poets and trade routes with vegan merchants. He remembered every person they met and all the small details that mattered to each culture. But she also noticed things that others missed. Tom never sat with his back to a door. He studied the layout of every new place they visited. He asked innocent questions about security systems and defense protocols. When they attended formal dinners, he always knew which exits led where. Their marriage had settled into a comfortable partnership. They shared meals and conversation. Tom was intelligent and well-read. He made her laugh with stories from his travels. But he still slept in a separate bedroom, and Zara knew almost nothing about his life before their wedding. They were staying on Nexus Prime, the largest neutral trading station in the galaxy, when the emergency broadcasts began. Zara woke to the sound of alarms echoing through their quarters. Tom was already awake, standing by the communication panel in his sleeping clothes. His face was grim as he listened to the incoming reports. "What is happening?" Zara asked, pulling on her robe. "The Zarathi horde has attacked the border worlds," Tom replied without looking away from the screen. 12 systems hit simultaneously. They destroyed the early warning stations first. Zara felt ice in her veins. The Zarathi were the oldest enemy in known space. They had appeared from dark space 2,000 years ago, destroying everything in their path. Every major civilization had united to drive them back beyond the galactic rim. The war had lasted 3 centuries and claimed billions of lives. How many ships? She asked. Unknown. But they have taken Veyron, Threshold, and New Geneva. The defenders never had time to send detailed reports. The communication panel chimed. A priority message from the Keltharian High Command appeared on screen. General Korvak's face looked haggard. Your Highness, you must return to the homeworld immediately. The Council is calling an emergency session. All military forces are being mobilized. Understood, Zara replied. We will depart within the hour. When the transmission ended, Tom was already moving toward his clothes. I need to contact my superiors. The Terran Federation will honor our alliance. Zara watched him dress. Even in crisis, Tom moved with that same careful efficiency she had noticed during the assassin attack. Every action had purpose. Tom, she said quietly. Tell me the truth. How bad is this? He paused while buttoning his uniform jacket. The Zarathi do not raid or conquer. They consume. If they have returned, it means they have grown strong enough to challenge the entire galaxy again. The journey back to Kelthara took 18 hours through hyperspace. During the trip, reports continued streaming in from the attacked systems. The news grew worse with each update. The Zarathi fleet was massive, using technology no one had seen before. Their ships appeared to be biological rather than mechanical, able to repair damage and adapt to enemy weapons. When they arrived at the homeworld, the royal palace buzzed with activity. Military officers rushed through corridors carrying data tablets and strategic charts. Communication stations operated around the clock, coordinating with allied fleets across known space. Zara attended the emergency council session while Tom met with the human diplomatic mission. The Keltharian generals presented their analysis of the Zarathi threat. The enemy had at least 5,000 warships, supported by countless smaller vessels. They were moving toward the core worlds in 3 separate battle groups. We estimate 4 weeks before they reach the main shipping lanes, General Korvak explained. 6 weeks before they threaten any major population centers. What are our response options? Asked Council Leader Vex. Full mobilization of all Keltharian forces. Request immediate support from our allies. Establish defensive positions at the Meridian Sector choke points. It was a solid plan. The Keltharians were master strategists. They would position their fleets at the natural bottlenecks between star systems, forcing the Zarathi to attack through narrow corridors where superior numbers mattered less. But when the Joint Command meeting convened that evening, Tom surprised everyone. The Terran Federation respectfully requests field command of all human military assets, he announced to the assembled generals and admirals. Silence filled the conference room. Admiral Thorne, the senior Keltharian commander, frowned at Tom across the holographic display table. Commander Chen, you are a diplomatic officer, Admiral Thorne said carefully. Military command should fall to your fleet admirals. With respect, Admiral, the Federation has designated me as Senior Tactical Coordinator for this operation. General Korvak leaned forward. Tom, during our conversations, you demonstrated excellent understanding of military theory. But commanding actual forces in combat is different from academic knowledge. Tom stood and moved to the central display showing the current Zarathi positions. General, what would be your primary concern in engaging this enemy fleet? Their numerical advantage. We must use terrain and prepared positions to offset their ship count. And if they refuse to engage at your chosen battlefields? Korvak considered this. Then we would need to be flexible. Adapt our strategy to force them into unfavorable positions. Tom nodded. Exactly. But that assumes the Zarathi will behave like conventional enemies. What if they do not? He touched the display controls. The star map zoomed in on the border regions where attacks had occurred. Red symbols marked destroyed stations and defeated fleets. Look at their attack pattern, Tom continued. They did not target military bases or strategic resources. They hit civilian shipping lanes and communication relays. They want us confused and isolated. Admiral Thorne studied the display. To prevent us from coordinating a unified defense. Partly. But I think their real goal is different. Tom highlighted several attack systems. These locations are all along the major hyperspace routes. The Zarathi are not trying to conquer territory. They are cutting our supply lines. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. If the Zarathi controlled the shipping lanes, they could starve entire worlds without firing another shot. What do you propose? Admiral Thorne asked. Tom smiled, and Zara saw that predator look flash in his eyes again. We do not defend the lanes. We take them back. Over the next 2 hours, Tom outlined the most insane military strategy Zara had ever heard. Instead of building defensive positions, he wanted to split the combined fleet into fast-moving strike groups. These forces would hit Zarathi positions simultaneously across multiple systems, using the enemy's own dispersed formation against them. You are suggesting we abandon defensive advantage to match their mobility, General Korvac said. That puts us at even greater disadvantage numerically. Only if we fight them ship to ship, Tom replied. But what if we do not fight their ships at all? He called up detailed scans of the asteroid fields near the contested systems. The Zarathi need to control hyperspace exit points. Those exit points are all near asteroid belts or debris fields. We use those environmental features as weapons. Tom showed them how human engineering ships could plant charges throughout the asteroid fields. When enemy fleets arrived, the explosions would turn thousands of space rocks into high-velocity projectiles. The Zarathi would face not just human weapons, but the entire local environment turned hostile. And what about their numerical advantage? Admiral Thorne asked. We eliminate it by refusing to fight where they expect. Tom highlighted civilian shipping routes throughout the sector. Every merchant vessel, every transport, every private ship becomes part of our fleet. The Keltharian officers looked shocked. Using civilian ships in military operations violated every standard rule of warfare. Tom, Zara said carefully, you are talking about turning innocent people into soldiers. I am talking about turning innocent people into survivors, Tom replied. The Zarathi do not distinguish between military and civilian targets. Our people are going to die regardless. But if we arm the civilian fleet and coordinate their movements, they become mobile bases of operation. He showed them how cargo ships could carry assault troops between systems faster than military transports. How passenger liners could serve as hospital ships and command centers. How mining vessels could be converted into improvised warships with greater firepower than traditional frigates. This is not conventional warfare, General Korvac said slowly. No, Tom agreed. It is human warfare. The meeting continued past midnight. Tom answered every objection with detailed tactical solutions. When Admiral Thorne worried about communication between scattered forces, Tom explained how they could use civilian networks to create redundant command structures. When General Korvac questioned supply logistics, Tom showed how captured Zarathi resources could support human forces indefinitely. Finally, Admiral Thorne called for a vote. All those in favor of granting tactical command to the Terran Federation. The vote was close, but Tom's plan was approved. 3 days later, Zara watched from the command center as Tom coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history. Hundreds of ships departed Kelthara simultaneously, heading for targets across 12 different star systems. But Tom was not commanding from the safety of headquarters. He had insisted on personally leading the most dangerous mission. Target is the Zarathi fleet holding position at Crenshaw's belt, Tom announced over the communication channel. Estimated enemy strength is 200 vessels. Our force consists of 37 ships, including 18 converted civilian craft. Zara listened to the tactical reports streaming in from the assault fleet. Tom had taken his own advice about using the environment as a weapon. His ships were approaching through the asteroid field, using the space rocks as cover. Enemy sensors are tracking our approach, reported Captain Mills from the assault ship Defiance. They are moving to intercept. Let them come, Tom replied calmly. All ships maintain course. Engineering teams, prepare charges for deployment. Zara could see the tactical display showing both fleets converging on the asteroid belt. The Zarathi had twice as many ships, but they were flying in standard formation through open space. Tom's fleet was scattered throughout the asteroid field like individual hunters. Charges deployed and armed, came the engineering report. All civilian vessels, begin evasive maneuvers. Military ships, target enemy scouts only. Let the main fleet enter the belt. On the display, Zara watched the Zarathi fleet advance confidently into the asteroid field. They had no reason to fear human trickery. Their ships were larger and more advanced. They outnumbered the human force significantly. Enemy main body is now within optimal range, Tom announced. Execute Nova Protocol. The tactical display erupted in brilliant flashes as hundreds of explosive charges detonated simultaneously throughout the asteroid belt. Space rocks the size of buildings accelerated to incredible speeds. The Zarathi fleet found itself in the middle of an artificial meteor storm. Enemy ships tried to dodge, but they were too tightly grouped. Asteroids smashed through their hull plating. Debris clouds blocked their sensors. The orderly formation dissolved into chaos as captains tried desperately to avoid collision. All ships, commence attack runs, Tom ordered. Now the human fleet emerged from hiding positions throughout the asteroid field. Tom had positioned his ships so that damaged enemy vessels faced attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The Zarathi could not coordinate defensive fire while still trying to navigate the debris storm. The battle lasted only 27 minutes. When it ended, the Zarathi force was completely destroyed. Tom's fleet had lost 3 ships. Similar reports arrived from across the combat zone. Human forces were winning impossible victories against superior numbers. The Zarathi, who had seemed invincible just days before, were being systematically eliminated by tactics they had never encountered. From the command center, Zara watched her husband coordinate 12 simultaneous battles across space. He spoke calmly into his headset, adjusting strategies in real time as new information arrived. When one assault team became trapped, Tom rerouted support from 3 other operations. When another team discovered weak points in enemy defenses, he immediately shared that intelligence across the entire fleet. "Princess," General Korvac said quietly beside her. "Your husband is not fighting like any human I have ever seen." Zara nodded, unable to look away from Tom's focused face. "He is not fighting like anyone I have ever seen." As the reports of victory continued streaming in, Zara began to understand something that made her both proud and terrified. The galaxy had always seen humans as the young race, the newcomers who had barely learned to travel between stars. But they had been wrong. Humans had not learned to fight wars from the older civilizations. They had been teaching themselves something entirely different. Something that might be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The victories across the border systems had bought them precious time, but Princess Zara knew the real war was just beginning. For 2 weeks, Tom's unconventional tactics had devastated Zarathi forces throughout the outer territories. Enemy fleets that had seemed unstoppable were reduced to scattered debris fields. The galaxy watched in amazement as human forces achieved impossible victories against overwhelming odds. But now the Zarathi had responded with their true power. Standing in the command center of the Keltharian homeworld, Zara stared at the massive tactical display showing long-range sensor readings. The image made her blood turn cold. Approaching through deep space was the largest fleet anyone had ever seen. Thousands of massive ships, each one the size of a small city. At the center of the formation moved something that defied comprehension. Preliminary scans indicate the central vessel is approximately 200 kilometers in length, reported Chief Analyst Remington. Energy readings suggest it carries planet-breaking capability. Admiral Thorne stood beside the display, his face grim. They call it the World Eater. Our intelligence files contain references from the ancient wars. It can crack a planet's crust from orbit. Tom studied the sensor data with that same calm focus Zara had learned to recognize. He had returned from the border campaigns 3 days ago, bringing with him detailed intelligence about Zarathi ship design and tactics. But even his brilliant strategies seemed inadequate against this overwhelming force. Time to arrival? Tom asked quietly. 72 hours to the edge of our system. Another 12 hours to reach the homeworld, Rem replied. General Korvac joined them at the display. Combined Allied forces total 800 ships. The enemy fleet contains at least 4,000 vessels, plus the World Eater itself. Even with our recent tactical successes, the numbers are impossible. Tom nodded thoughtfully. What is the evacuation status for non-essential populations? Transport ships are moving civilians from the outer colonies. But we cannot evacuate the homeworld in time, Admiral Thorne said. Too many people, not enough ships. For the next several hours, Zara watched the Allied commanders develop their final battle plan. It was solid military strategy, using every lesson learned from centuries of warfare. The combined fleet would establish defensive positions around the homeworld. Planetary defense platforms would provide supporting fire. Fighter squadrons would harass enemy formations while capital ships engaged the main force. Everyone knew it would not be enough. The plan might delay the inevitable, but could not prevent it. When the presentations ended, the room fell into somber silence. That was when Tom spoke. I want command of all human vessels in the system, he said quietly. Military, civilian, everything with an engine. Admiral Thorne frowned. Tom, we just outlined the defensive strategy. Your human forces are critical components of the plan. The plan will fail, Tom replied matter-of-factly. Good strategy, but insufficient resources. We need a different approach. General Korvac leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Tom walked to the display controls and called up detailed information about every ship in the system. Military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining craft, research ships, even small personal shuttles. Thousands of individual craft scattered throughout the solar system. The Zarathi expect us to defend fixed positions. They will deploy their fleet in standard siege formation around the planet. Their tactics assume we will fight defensively until overwhelmed. Because that is what any rational commander would do, Admiral Thorne pointed out. Tom smiled with that predator expression Zara had seen before. Exactly. But I am not a rational commander. I am a human commander. He began highlighting specific groups of ships on the display. Every civilian vessel will be equipped with the maximum amount of antimatter explosives it can carry. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even personal shuttles. Everything becomes a guided missile. The room erupted in shocked voices. Admiral Thorne stood abruptly. You cannot seriously suggest turning civilian ships into suicide weapons. I am suggesting we turn civilian ships into the largest coordinated strike force in galactic history, Tom replied calmly. But the crews will not be aboard. Tom showed them his real plan. The civilian vessels would indeed carry massive antimatter charges, but they would be operated remotely by artificial intelligence systems. Meanwhile, the actual crews would be distributed among smaller, faster ships hidden throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets. The Zarathi will detect our defensive fleet and position themselves for siege operations. They will not expect thousands of unmanned vessels to suddenly accelerate from every direction simultaneously. Zara studied the tactical projection. Tom was proposing to turn the entire solar system into a weapon. Every moon, asteroid, and space station would hide small craft ready to coordinate attacks. When the enemy fleet arrived, they would face not just the defensive force, but everything capable of movement within the system. The collision velocities alone would be devastating, Chief Analyst Rem noted. A cargo hauler moving at maximum acceleration, packed with antimatter, would penetrate any known armor. What about the World Eater? General Korvac asked. That vessel is too large to destroy with ramming attacks. Tom's expression grew darker. The World Eater is not the target. The target is everything around it. He showed them sensor analysis from the approaching fleet. The massive central ship was supported by thousands of smaller vessels providing power, supplies, and coordination. It was not truly one ship, but an entire fleet formation built around a mobile command center. We destroy the support network first. Cut power conduits, eliminate supply ships, overload communication systems. The World Eater becomes a giant floating target with no way to coordinate its weapons. The more Tom explained his strategy, the more insane it sounded. He wanted to scatter human forces throughout the solar system, coordinate simultaneous attacks from dozens of different directions, and turn every available resource into an improvised weapon. But as Zara listened to his detailed tactical breakdown, she began to understand the terrible brilliance of the plan. The Zarathi had never faced anything like this because no civilization had ever been desperate or crazy enough to attempt it. You are talking about the complete militarization of civilian space, Admiral Thorne said slowly. I am talking about survival, Tom replied. The Zarathi do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate surrender. They consume everything in their path. Our choice is to fight with everything we have, or die knowing we held something back. The debate continued for hours. Eventually, facing impossible odds and no viable alternatives, the Allied command approved Tom's plan. The next 2 days passed in frantic preparation. Every ship in the system was modified for combat operations. Civilian vessels received remote control systems and antimatter charges. Military ships were refitted with extended-range communication equipment. Personnel were redistributed to ensure no craft operated without sufficient crew. Zara found herself assigned to a command ship hidden in the asteroid belt, along with other civilian leaders and support staff. From there, she would observe the battle through sensor feeds and communication channels. Tom, however, would be leading the attack personally. You should command from a safe location, Zara told him the night before the enemy arrived. Coordinate the overall strategy rather than risking yourself in direct combat. Tom was checking his personal equipment in their quarters. He wore a modified flight suit with advanced life support systems. His gear included enough emergency supplies to survive in space for days if necessary. The plan requires precise timing across thousands of individual actions, he replied. I need to be in position to make real-time adjustments. But if something happens to you? Tom stopped packing and looked at her directly. Zara, I need you to understand something. This battle will determine whether humanity survives as a free species. If we lose here, the Zarathi will hunt down every human world until none remain. She had known the stakes intellectually, but hearing Tom say it so clearly made the reality strike home. This was not just about saving the Keltharian homeworld. It was about preventing human extinction. What if the plan fails, she asked quietly. Then we try something else. Humans do not surrender. We do not accept defeat. We adapt and continue fighting until either we win or there is nothing left to fight with. The next morning, long-range sensors detected the approaching Zarathi fleet. The enemy formation was even larger than initial estimates suggested. Over 5,000 ships surrounded the massive World Eater, moving in perfect coordination through deep space. Tom departed for his command ship 6 hours before the enemy arrived in system. Zara watched his transport disappear among the asteroids, knowing she might never see her husband again. When the Zarathi fleet finally entered sensor range, their formation was exactly as Tom had predicted. The World Eater positioned itself at the center of a defensive sphere, with supporting vessels arranged in concentric rings around it. Smaller ships spread out to establish a siege perimeter around the planet. Enemy fleet has achieved combat positions, reported the sensor operator aboard Zara's command ship. They are beginning bombardment of outer defense platforms. Through the communication channels, Zara could hear reports from across the system. The official defensive fleet was engaging enemy scouts according to plan. Planetary defense weapons fired at maximum range. Fighter squadrons harassed the outer formations. But the real battle was still waiting to begin. "All civilian vessels report ready," came Tom's voice over the communication network. "Remote systems operational. Crews have reached safe positions." Zara watched the tactical display as thousands of small icons suddenly appeared throughout the solar system. Ships that had been hiding behind moons and asteroids began moving toward their targets. Every cargo hauler, passenger liner, and mining craft in the system accelerated simultaneously toward the enemy fleet. The Zarathi detected the approaching vessels immediately, but they were confused by the scattered attack pattern. Their ships began firing defensive weapons, but there were too many targets approaching from too many directions. "Phase 1, execute," Tom announced. The first wave of civilian ships reached the enemy formation. Explosions erupted throughout the Zarathi fleet as antimatter charges detonated against hull armor. Individual enemy ships disappeared in brilliant flashes of light. The perfect formation began to break apart as captains tried to avoid the continuing impacts. But Tom was not finished. "Phase 2, execute." Now the military vessels emerged from hiding. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, they targeted the debris clouds created by the first attack. Energy weapons superheated metal fragments, turning them into clouds of plasma that spread throughout the enemy formation. The Zarathi fleet found itself fighting not just human weapons, but the burning remains of their own destroyed ships. Communication systems failed as electromagnetic interference overwhelmed their networks. Navigation became impossible as sensor readings were blocked by expanding debris fields. Phase 3, execute. Human forces had been positioning themselves during the chaos of the first two attacks. Now small craft emerged from every direction simultaneously, targeting not enemy ships but the connections between them. Power conduits, communication relays, supply lines, everything that held the massive fleet together became targets for precision strikes. The World Eater, which had seemed invincible just hours before, suddenly found itself isolated in space. Its support fleet was scattered, destroyed, or unable to communicate. Without coordination, the massive vessel could not effectively target the small, fast-moving human ships that swarmed around it like angry insects. Tom's voice came across all channels, calm and clear despite the chaos of battle. "All units, final phase. Target the primary vessel's power systems." What followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. Hundreds of human ships converged on the World Eater from every possible angle. They did not try to destroy it directly, but instead systematically disabled every system that kept it operational. Zara watched through the sensor feeds as her husband personally led a strike team into the superstructure of the enemy flagship. Using modified mining equipment, they penetrated deep into the vessel's interior and began planting explosives at critical structural points. When Tom's team emerged from the dying ship, the World Eater was already breaking apart from internal damage. The massive vessel that had threatened entire worlds was reduced to expanding clouds of debris and escaping atmosphere. The surviving Zarathi ships retreated into deep space, leaving behind the wreckage of what had been the most powerful fleet in galactic history. In the aftermath, as rescue teams searched for survivors and damage assessment began, Zara finally understood what she had truly married. Tom was not just a skilled soldier or brilliant tactician. He represented something entirely new in galactic warfare. Humans did not fight wars the way other species did. They did not accept limitations or follow conventional rules. When faced with impossible odds, they transformed everything around them into weapons and kept fighting until either they won or there was nothing left to fight with. Standing beside Tom as he quietly coordinated relief efforts for the refugees and survivors, Zara realized the galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. The other civilizations had spent centuries learning to wage war efficiently. But humanity had learned to wage war absolutely. And that made all the difference.